Hello and happy holidays. My name is John Bonjour. I am a comic book writer and artist, and today I have been working on doing some Christmas cards for some coworkers. I work as a chef at a restaurant very near here. You're not here, you don't know where here is, but very near to my house, I guess. It's like a 15-minute bike ride. That's not applicable. I don't know why I told you that. Anyway, I work at a restaurant slash coffee shop, and I've been making some cards for my coworkers because I thought it would be fun. And more importantly than that, I am painting with coffee from the coffee shop. So I wanted to walk you through that process of painting with coffee because it's a thing I've been doing for a number of years and absolutely love and think it comes out really cool. So join me over at my desk, which is also very near to here if that's important to you, as I paint some Christmas cards. Welcome to my desk. You will note very, very quickly right off the bat that I am in fact painting a little gingerbread man, Jeff Probst from Survivor. I have a very close friend and coworker in Maddie who loves Survivor, got me watching the show as well. So I was doing a series of Christmas cards that were all different gingerbread men, and I had to make hers Jeff. You will also notice that I am going through very, very early on and doing some light painting. Right now I have about 3 or 4, actually I think in this version I have 2 different levels of depth and darkness of the coffee color. Basically, the way that I do that is I take 1 shot of espresso and I dilute it pretty significantly. That's the one I'm using right now. I dilute it with water. And then the second shot of espresso, I do just straight espresso, and I paint with that as a darker tone. The fun thing about coffee, and you can see that I'm filling in just a lot of the kind of blanker spaces of the painting. But the fun thing about coffee and painting with coffee is that it's like watercolor, but with 1 shade, and you just have to think about the shading. You don't have to think about colors necessarily, although with things that you want to be darker, you do have to think about which shade to use that will kind of convey that darkness. But it is fun painting with coffee because you get to just think about the tones. You get to just think about how these things would look in the lighting and how they would operate in the layering. And that's a lot more fun, to me anyway, than painting with watercolor, where you also have to think about how the colors are going to blend. That stresses me out, if I'm being honest. A fun little tidbit, I'm for sure not the first person to come up with painting with coffee, but I did come up with it by myself. I was on a plane. I believe I was traveling to Texas, maybe Georgia. I don't 100% remember. I was on a plane and I had brought a sketchbook, had done my sketches, and I didn't know what to do. I was very bored. They came around with some different snacks and drinks. I got a coffee, which, by the way, I have learned since you should absolutely never, ever do. Don't ever get coffee on a plane. Apparently it's disgusting, the water and way that they use it. But I got a coffee. I was a wee little boy. And it was bad coffee, to be fair, so I decided, you know what, I'm going to try something, and I decided to paint with coffee. I used one of the little straws because I didn't have a paintbrush, and it came out really fun. I don't know where that drawing is. I may have posted it on my Instagram. I don't 100% remember. I should look that up now that I'm thinking about it. But I remember doing it and thinking, man, this is really fun. It was also something that I tried to do for Comic-Cons. I was trying to sell these paintings of different weird coffee monsters and all of that. I didn't really know my market because I was also trying to sell comic books. I still don't know my market, so live and learn, I guess, or live and don't learn. Point being, I've been painting with coffee for a very long time, and you'll see as I'm working on this shirt here, this is when I started using the straight espresso as the darker base color, which just gives you a little more variation. So the shirt, the hat, I think I did that with the mountains in the background as well. We'll see as we get further into it. But I'm just carefully filling in all those shapes. I do try to let these layers dry as much as I can because if you're not careful, same with watercolor, if you connect the two painted pieces, they bleed into each other really quickly. The nice thing about watercolor paper, really good watercolor paper, and coffee as a form of watercolor is that they both dry relatively fast. So the paper will absorb all of the pigment and the coffee tends to evaporate fairly quickly. So it dries really fast. The whole process, I think the video itself is probably going to be around 10 minutes. The whole process, including dry time, was probably 15, maybe 20 for the paint portion of it. The sketch and drawing, maybe another 15, 20. So this is a 30 or 40 minute project, which is not bad at all. Like I said, I'm going through, I love to leave some white space whenever I paint with coffee as a form of highlight. I think it just immediately adds so much depth and vibrancy to the thing. You could technically do just these 2 layers, just the base layer for the water, the base layer for the clothes, and the mountains and all that, and call it a day. As we go further through this painting, you're gonna see that I do a series of layers and letting them dry, and then layers and letting them dry. Obviously, some of this is sped up some. So maybe it was more than 10 minutes now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, I do a series of many, many layers because I think the further you go into these layers, the more depth you add. At least for my money, it really adds a lot of finality to the piece. It makes it feel like a finished product in a way that it just doesn't in these first couple of layers. Don't get me wrong, like I said, it does look good here. I just don't think it looks as good as it's going to toward the end. Now I'm going back in again with, I might be using the straight espresso for this. I'm going back in and shading on the gingerbread man itself because he is well dried. Looks like I am using the straight espresso, that's cool. So yeah, I'm just getting darker tones. You can usually use the same kind of pigment. You can use the same, like this espresso I'll use 2 or 3 times, and the more layers you do, the darker it gets, which is pretty sweet. Espresso is honestly kind of a magic paint as far as my money goes, because it's pretty hard to make look genuinely bad. You just have to keep working at it and keep fiddling with it as you go, and it'll probably end up looking pretty good. Coming in here, doing some of the shading on there. Honestly, I didn't think very much about the lighting of this piece. I just kind of came up with a main source of light, which is just the upper left, but even the mountains don't necessarily reflect that, so that was a bit of a mistake, but what are you gonna do? On that hand there, just a quick note, I left 2 kind of droplets of the pigment, of the paint, and I came back in and painted over them and used them in the painting. That is a dangerous game if you ever do this, because you fully run the risk of them drying and then being way too dark, or you run the risk of them bleeding out into the rest of the painting. So don't do that. This is not a how-to necessarily, it's just talking about my process. And because I'm sort of doing the same thing for a while, I'm also going to be talking about Christmas and the holidays. Holidays are interesting for artists, I think, because we all, well, maybe everybody, we all have this moment around Christmas time and especially around New Year's where everything just seems to look amazing and perfect and also terrible. There's this thing, at least I'm experiencing it this year, where looking at 2026, I am both elated with everything that I get to be doing and terrified of every single step of the process. I spent a long time trying to figure out what my artistic process was going to look like, how my business was going to work as we go forward, how I'm starting a business for my art and trying to make that my income. And it's wicked scary. It's scary as hell, my man. Like it is not a fun time necessarily. So I'm interested to see how these holidays go. I'm spending a lot of time with my family. I'm burning out just a wee bit. And again, now as we're getting back into the painting, you can see that I'm using the espresso again, where I use this just straight espresso. I don't know if I think I come back a couple of times toward the end with just a little bit of that diluted stuff to kind of play with the water and the clouds a little bit more. The other fun thing is until it is fully, completely dry, which takes a lot longer, you can kind of come in and mess with the lines and the shading and all that. You can blend things together if you want to. I chose to go for more of a cell shading type approach to this because I think it's a little bit easier and I think tends to look a little bit better. But you get those hard lines in the layering of the tones, which is good and bad. Also, as coffee tends to dry, and watercolor as well, you kind of get a harder line around the outside of whatever layer it is. You can go in and adjust that and take that out. You can also leave it. I think it looks pretty cool. So you can look at it either way, quite honestly. Coming into the rock here, I honestly, if doing this again, as I'm watching this video, I should have taken a little bit more care with getting smaller brushes and being a little more attentive to detail. But this was like the 15th card I made. The final nice thing about painting with coffee, you get to drink your paint. Thank you so much for watching this video and for caring about my art. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Merry Christmas, and I love you all.